Introduce our second speaker, who is going to talk on the subject of international standards and their use in the commercial sector. Wombwell is the technical manager for British Marine. Following a number of years working in the marine industry, he returned to university and graduated from Solent University of Southampton in 2004 with a BSc in honours in yacht manufacturing and surveying. He's run his own yacht consultancy in Menorca, performing a full range of small and medium-sized yacht surveys, from accident evaluation to full condition surveys, becoming a member of the YDSA and carrying out MCA tonnage and coding inspections. He then had a 2-year sabbatical in the Far East, after which he joined British Marine, formerly British Marine Federation, in 2014 as technical executive, and was appointed technical manager in 2015, leading a small team that provides technical support to the British Marine members, and more importantly, represents their interests in various forums, including standards-making committees. And in that field, Ross is currently the chairman of the British Standards Institute Small Craft Committee. He sits on the British Standards Institute Large Yacht Committee, dedicated LPG Appliances Committee, and Recreational Boating Services Committee, along with sitting on the RENA Small Craft Committee as an industry representative. I warn you, he is passionate about the harmonisation of codes. Ross.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Ross Wombwell. I am the technical manager at British Marine as my day job, but my other hat is as the chairman of BSc 33, which is the Small Craft Committee at British Standards. I also spend a lot of time taking the UK position into international standards work. Okay, so we start. So I really want to start with just looking back, going back a couple hundred years in the UK. So Henry Maudsley. Maudsley's invention around 1800 of the metal lathe enabled the manufacture of standard screw thread sizes. This was the start. Now, standard screw thread sizes allowed interchangeable parts and the development of mass production. Moving on to Sir Joseph Whitworth, English engineer, entrepreneur, and inventor. Now, he devised a British standard Whitworth system to create an acceptable standard for screw threads. It's just up there in the top corner. Now, it became known as the British Standard Whitworth, widely adopted in other countries. And one example of the use was with the Royal Navy's Crimean War gunboats. So it's really the first documented instance of mass production techniques being applied to the marine engineering field. So if we then move on 100 or so years, British Standards Institution, formed in 1901, the first national standard body in the world. We can see the BSI kite mark there. Hopefully you can all recognise the kite mark. That was 1903, and we are now the leading national standards body in the world, publishing considerable number of standards every year. Following up from BSI, we've got the International Standards Organisation. So in London in 1946, 65 delegates from 25 countries, they met at the Institute of Civil Engineers in London and decided to create an international organisation to look after the harmonisation of industry standards. In 1947, ISO officially came into existence, based in Geneva. Originally it had 67 technical committees. There are now 779. So it started off fairly small, and it's grown and grown and grown. Since then, they have published over 21,633 standards in different areas. Today, 163 national standards bodies.
It's really hard to hear at the back. Can you either come in close to the microphone, or we can give you a personal microphone?
So yeah, 163 national standards bodies. So it really is drawing countries from all around the world to try and harmonise standards internationally to help assist trade. World Trade Organization. Everyone should have heard of the World Trade Organization, an intergovernmental organisation regulates international trade. Officially commenced in 1995. replacing the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trades, which had been around for a number of years before that. The WTO deals with regulation of trade between participating countries by providing a framework for negotiating trade agreements. Yet it's there to ensure the trade flows as smoothly and freely as possible. And they rely on ISO. The World Trade, they have a technical barriers to trade agreement, which try and help ensure the technical regulations don't create unnecessary barriers to trade, whilst also allowing countries to modify the domestic regulations in certain aspects, such as safety and environmental concerns. So this really moves on to why I'm here, which is talking about standardization. And for me, I am very passionate about standardization and harmonization. As a chairman at BSI, it really is my job to promote it and to try and push it out, to try and get everyone to accept, acknowledge and use. So whilst I'm representing the trade industry, the small commercial industry, I'm really here today on behalf of the British Standards Institute. So standards, what are they? They're reference documents that represent consensus, and I think that's the most important word in that sentence or in the entire presentation. It's about consensus amongst all stakeholders. Everyone gets the opportunity to input. We don't limit the input from any one organisation, type of organisation or person. And the benchmarks they define are based on collective knowledge, which are then distilled and updated on a regular basis as technology moves forward. In that way, they foster the development of the industry. They help the industry move forward. They support the industry moving forward, whichever industry it is about. So it stands apart really as the indispensable development tool for organisations, because it built customer trust in products, services, and also systems. So I'm just going to start having a look at some of the benefits, just very briefly run through benefits of standardisation. Key factor of trade. It allows for the reduction of trade barriers between countries, opens up those areas of trade for your domestic manufacturers. It can also help industry access global markets. It really does. It helps industry go out and sell to an entire global market. Single market in Europe has, we've been in it for a few years, but all of a sudden we're starting to look at what life might be like outside. Now, the single market was created to enable trade to cross freely between us. It's that simple. Now, the way that they based it was to encourage innovation, was on something called the New Approach concept. Now, the New Approach concept doesn't apply at the moment to commercial, however, it applies to a number of other areas, some of which do include the components that go into commercial vessels. It's a very high level of foundation. Now, what they do is they give you something to achieve, and they don't tell you how to achieve it. What they use are international standards to then provide the technical basis on how to achieve that high level regulation. And it really has, if you look at the areas in Europe in which there has been a harmonisation of rules and regulations, those industries have blossomed. They really have. There are a number, as I said, Unfortunately, small commercial at the moment isn't under a directive, but who knows in the future? The way Europe's going, they are having more and more influence on national regulations. Standards and innovation, they can make an important contribution to development of sustainable industrial policy. They really can. You can forward plan, you can look at the future. You can actually see what you need to achieve. There's no major changes, and you can be part of the development process should there be changes. It brings a solid foundation to build and disseminate innovative technologies and enhance business practices. They also have a very positive influence on innovation, such as patents do, in dissemination of new technical advancements. When there is a new area of technology, it generally goes into a standard first. And then that standard is a way of having access to that innovation for a reasonable price. And we'll talk about reasonable prices a bit later on, because I know there's a lot of passionate feeling about the cost of standards. Finally, technology transfer. Standards, they make technical specifications more transparent. There is no guessing. You know, I know a lot of people who work in the small commercial sector, sometimes you're trying to read the mind of the surveyor as he comes along. You're trying to read his mind to try and figure out what exactly it is that he wants. Standards lay it all out on the table. You know, it's there. It has to be 3 mil, it has to be 10 mil, it has to be 2 meters, it has to be 5 meters. It's got to be made out of steel. It is there. It's very easy to access. And they also encourage technical transfer from technology leaders to developing nations. It helps develop nations get involved as part of the work economy. One last one is the environment. Standardization is moving very quickly into environmental concerns, setting emission standards. A lot of the new regulations applicable to commercial engines are based upon ISO standards. They're looking at emission standards, how to test, load cycles, etc. So standards are finding their way in already into the commercial sector significantly. It's just about encouraging a little bit more acceptance. So ISO. Has everyone heard of ISO? Everyone knows the International Standards Organization. I'm going to concentrate today on TC 188, Small Craft Committee. This is the Small Craft Committee. There are others such as TC8, which is the ships. There is a personal protective equipment technical committee. There are various. We're going to concentrate today on the Small Craft Committee, and there we have the scope. So it does reference recreational craft, and to be honest, they started off with recreational. You know, they were mandated by Europe. Europe said to ISO, make us some standards so we can have a new approach for recreational. But as the standards have been developed, and as they are developing more, they are looking more at the commercial sector. Now, it's all under 24 meters at this stage. Now, standards cost a lot of money to develop. Yeah, a lot of money. They say an average standard costs about 60,000 to develop a single standard, because you are having multiple people from all around the world, all coming, meeting up, sitting down, and trying to progress this standard on a consensus and stakeholder basis. Why limit? Why limit them to just recreational? If a standard is fit for purpose, it needs to be fit for purpose. If it's fit for purpose, then it should be acceptable to use. So let's have a quick look at the participants. There we go. So TC 188 has significant international input. It is an international standard. It's not a European standard. It's not an American standard. It is international. There we have 19 participating members in blue, including some big nations, Russia, China, US, Canada, Australia, as well as a lot of European. But we also have what are called observing members. They keep an eye on it. They're kind of CC'd in to the discussion. And then if they see something that they're interested in, they want to get involved, then they have that ability to then engage and start to come along to the meetings and turn into a participating member. Now, there we go, there's a list. Participating and observing members. There's quite a few there. So it is an internationally developed standard in small craft.
Why was Sweden in darker blue? What was that just?
They have the secretariat. So they put the secretary. So this is BSI GME 33 small craft. This is the UK Shadow Committee for TC 188. This is where we take stakeholders from all around the UK, and what we do is we bring them all together, and we ask what is the UK's position. It is not an industry body, it is a full stakeholder body. And as we can see there, we have regulators. We have industry bodies such as my organisation, British Marine, but along with the Institute of Marine Engineering, International Institute of Marine Surveyors, YDSA, many organisations that you here today are members of. So you all get the opportunity to partake. You all get the opportunity to feed into this development. We also have educational establishments, Solent and Southampton. We have them on board so they can feed in when we need their technological knowledge. And we have user representation, Royal Yachting Association and National Association of Boat Owners. And then when we have very specific standards being developed, we go out to industry, because industry are the guys who actually use these standards day in, day out. If you want to look and review the standard on window manufacturer, you go out and talk to window manufacturers. That's what you do. They're the ones that are putting them into play every day, and ask them, where are the problems, what are the issues, what's the new technology that actually you can't use with this standard because the standard is a little too old there. So we engage with every stakeholder, yeah, and everyone has the opportunity to get involved. So just going up to the top, the principles in standard development. Key principles are, ISO doesn't decide when to start new standards. Yeah, they're asked. ISO are asked, and they can be asked by anybody. Yeah, there's a nice, on the British Standards website, there's a nice area where you can go and say, I think we should have a standard on this. Yeah, and then that will get fed in to our committee, and we'll discuss it, yeah, within the entire stakeholder group and say, well, actually, is this a good idea? Is it a bad idea? What do you think? Yeah, so ISO don't set the standards, they don't decide. It's up to us, all of us actually, as an industry, everyone in this room can put forward an opinion on whether or not you feel a standard needs, or there needs to be a new standard in a specific area. They are based on global expert opinion, and they really are. You know, you've seen the representation we have in the UK. Yeah, we have a full stakeholder engagement. Now, elsewhere, the Swedish, for example, they have exactly the same. You know, they have industry experts, they have representation from users, they have the governmental representation, regulatory representation. Now, they all engage, and then they feed into their committee, and their committee comes and sits with us in a room, and we discuss. Multi-stakeholder process, yeah, that's really just what I've said. It's everyone's got the opportunity to engage and input. Standards are based on consensus, so you don't always get what you want. But if we want a single level playing field, yeah, sometimes you are going to get what you want, and sometimes you have to give a little bit. So there is a lot of negotiation, and we don't always win. We don't always get what we want, but at the end of the day, throughout the world, it is considered a safe level. The standard is fit for purpose when published. So what is the process? It's actually quite a long process. Standards development, as I said, they can take up to 4 or 5 years. I think the stability standard 12217, which many of you will probably know, took 9-10 years to actually develop. It was a long, drawn-out process before we actually had something which was fit for purpose. But really, this is the different stages. We start off with a new work item, so that is, it could be either through engagement from someone saying we think we need a standard, come from a national standards body saying we need a standard, come from a regulator saying we need a standard. That's fed in. Yeah, and then it goes out to each country, and each country gets to vote. We all have a vote. So in the UK, it's the British Standard Institute, they vote on that standard and the different stages, whether or not they believe it's managed to get to the next stage, and so on and so forth. The consensus building, that is the hard part. That is when we have working groups, which are groups of national standards body representatives. Now that could be myself on occasions, however it could be other UK experts. The British Standards Committee picks, yeah, so we sit around the committee and we pick people to go and represent the UK. We tell them roughly, but we rely a lot on their expertise and or working groups to work with them to get the correct UK position. The consensus building is where we sit and we discuss, you know, and it goes round and round sometimes. You could be discussing something one day, the next day, the next working group meeting, all of a sudden you're having the same discussion because one country wants to raise the issue again. It does go round and round sometimes. Now, but at the end of the day, we will come out with what's called a draft international standard. A draft international standard hasn't been agreed, hasn't been published, but it is there, and that can then be disseminated amongst a wider stakeholder group, yeah, to get additional input. If there are no formal technical comments, we can then take that to final draft before it's published. It is a long, as I said, a long process, but there are lots of opportunities to get involved. There we go. BSI Standards Development have their own website. Within there, you can register, you can download public drafts. That's right at the first stage, of standard development. And you can input, you can read it, you can have a look and see what's going on. Yeah, and then you can feed into the development process. You can say whether or not you feel that it's on the right track or it's not on the right track. And that is open to everybody in the UK. Everybody can just log on and read the first stage, the public draft. Once we go to the next stage, we have got multi-stakeholder meetings. You know, everybody's engaged, and I'm sure everyone here is a member of one of those organisations. Feed into your organisations. They will have representatives sat on the committee. Yeah, now those representatives on the committee are encouraged to disseminate drafts as and when they arrive. You can then have a look, you can read them, you can see which way they're going, and then you again can feed into the development process. You can feed in. And that way, when we get to the stage where we're negotiating, we come from a unified UK position. You know, it is a UK industry position rather than just British Marine or YSA or whoever else. We work together to try and come to a consensus. Talk to your regulators. Yeah, there are a couple of regulators who sit on the committees. Yeah, talk to them. Yeah, phone up and say, I'm not happy about this. You know, they can hear. I think there's one or two in the room today. They won't like me encouraging you to talk to them about it, but no, they sit on the committee. So just, as I say, talk to your regulator. Just say, you know, why are you using this? Why are you using it? What's wrong with this? Discuss with them, and then they can then feed into the same group. Ask to join. You know, there is no restriction on people joining the committee. Yeah, you can apply to join the GME 33 Schoolcraft Committee. Yeah, that will then just go out amongst the committee members to vote on. So it's a normal committee, so everyone has the ability to apply to join to work with us. Alternatively, you may get a phone call from me occasionally. Yeah, my job is to ensure that the UK is correctly represented in all aspects of this development. So I will very often go out on the phone and say that we really need a UK expert in this area. And there are a couple of vacancies at the moment. So there's two standards which have been opened up for revision as of next week. One is on propeller tapers. So propeller tapers, we need an expert on that. We've got my position as British Marine, we do have members who I can go out to, but it's not just limited. Yeah, anyone can actually put their name forward and join. Another one is small inflatables. The small inflatable standard 6185 is being revised as well, so we need a representative on there. So let's get down to the small commercial vessels workload code. I think that's really the basis of the under 24 currently, going back through MGN 280 and back to the Brown Code, of course. So the workload code. This is a list of all the standards that fall within the small craft envelope. There's quite a few of them. There's about 85 or 90. So these are all the standards that fall within. One area of concern for me is the ones in red are the ones which are accepted by the workload code. And I am going to now push a little bit in regard to this area. What I've spoken about harmonisation, about working within a world, a global economy, yeah, we need to be able to harmonise. We need to push harmonisation. And at the moment, the workload code accepts some, however, doesn't accept a lot. So my job as chairman of BSI is to make sure our standards are used, and so it's to encourage regulators to accept the use of standards, or at least engage to ensure that the standards are correct. Here are a couple of standards which are currently under development, and this is a little bit, I suppose, of a warning, a concern that we have. Yeah, when there isn't this engagement. At the top in red are standards which are currently being revised, which are accepted by the workload code. Underneath we have standards which are being revised, which are not accepted by the workload code, just to show the difference. Now, at the top there, you can see there's a few important standards which are currently being revised and redeveloped at the moment. And this is one, 12216, Windows, hatches, port lights, deadlights. This is just a table. Table 1, minimum degree of watertightness. Those of you used 12216 will recognise that table. And here we have the proposal from the French delegation about how it's going to be changed, or how they would like to see it changed. Now, this is a standard which is accepted by the workload code. This is a significant change, a significant revision to that standard. Now, the problem that we find is without full engagement, we can have standards being changed which can affect legislation and regulation, yet without an understanding of how those standards have changed. Yeah, there needs to be awareness within industry, by you guys, by regulators, about these standards and how they are being revised on a regular basis to ensure that our domestic regulation, the level of safety that we have, yeah, retains that level, yeah, retains that safe level. Things don't happen without knowledge. So yes, as you can see, all the red's gone, and now we have a much more simplified application of watertightness. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Here's another one, 12215-5, scantlings, design pressures, a really important standard, another standard which is accepted by the workload code. This is a new proposal, again from the French. They are very, very vocal in the sort of small craft area for a new workboat annex. So they are creating a new workboat annex, or they're proposing the creation of a new workboat annex to go in the back of ISO 12215-5 design pressures to apply solely to workboats. Okay, now all this development is currently going on. There's a meeting on this next week. So, to ensure that our domestic regulation is kept up to date, we need to keep engaged, especially where they're referenced. The more we reference, the easier it is, because the more you engage, if we can get regulator as well as industry engagement at ISO level, then we can ensure the standards that are coming out meet what we need domestically in the UK and internationally for the commercial market. There's a list, so as you can see, we've got 13 standards being developed at the moment, 9 within personal safety equipment and 7 within engines and propulsion systems subcommittee. There are a lot of standards being revised. We need a lot of help, a lot of time and a lot of experts to feed in. Very quick update for those of you interested. There's been a lot of discussion about life raft, the 12-person limit on ISO 9650. Last year, at the plenary where we get all the world together, the ISO working group plenary, we discussed needing a revision because of the change to acceptance of certain ISO, this ISO. Now what we wanted to do is to increase the scope to above 12, maybe up to 14, 15, 16, wherever it ends up. This is ongoing. There was a negative vote, so the rest of the world said actually we don't need to do that. Yeah, which was a little bit concerning. Regardless of how many arms I tried to twist. So they've said no. Next week I get to face-to-face twist their arms because we have a plenary meeting next week. So I'm going to encourage them. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks I'll be able to say yes, we have accepted this for revision to change the scope above 12 persons. I'm going to speed up a little bit now. Very quickly, standard access. I know there's a lot of concern about costs. People think standards are expensive, and to be honest, some of them are. But they cost money to develop, so we have to ensure that they are funded, but there are different ways of access. Up here we have a table, something we've produced before for our RCD course of British Marine, where we show lots of different ways to access standards through different standards bodies. You don't have to buy from BSI. EVS at the top is the Estonian Centre for Standardization. Yeah, they can rent you a standard for £2 a day. All right, so you don't need to buy it. Okay, we've got the Bulgarian Institute for Standardization. You can rent 5 for a week. Yeah, for about £10. Yeah. Then we go down to some of the more regular ones, such as RCD Web, which many of you probably know. Rule Finder, yeah, the Dutch Rule Finder rather than the Lloyd's Rule Finder, and then from BSI as well. Down below, you can see how you can purchase them. Yeah, there are lots of different ways of purchasing. So yes, BSI is expensive, £146, 15085. You get the same standard from Bulgaria for 22 quid. Yeah, you can order it online and they'll send you an English version of Bulgarian. It's an English version. Yeah, so you can get it sent through to you. So standard access is not expensive. Yeah, you just need to play with how you get hold, how you access them. All right, some of the month-long contracts are a bit easier. I know Rule Finder have recently changed the rules. We worked with them for a bit, and IIMS to create monthly access. Yeah, and they have the workboat code on their site. You go through the workboat code. When there's a standard reference, you click the button. It takes you straight to the standard. Yeah, excellent system if you want ease of use. If you want it cheap, you're going to have to shop around. You have to put a bit more effort in, but it's still possible. Other sources, libraries. We have a fantastic library system that we want to see more used in the UK. Libraries have ISOs. You can go in, you can ask for them, you can order them. Yeah, you can read them. Yeah, some libraries, specifically central libraries, and I'm not going to say which one, offer online access free to British standards if you go through their online city library website. Yeah, so there is no excuse. There is no they're too expensive anymore. Yeah, they are available for everybody. Okay, but they still need to be paid for.
Oh, tell us which hybrid.
Trying to be subtle. Okay, all right. So, benefits. Yeah, the full benefits of standardization can be seen in the leisure sector. You know, where you can build a single boat and you can sell it to 600 million clients. Yeah, a single design, a single construction, that boat can then be sold to a possible market of 600 million people. There are benefits to harmonisation and standardisation. Yeah. It also brings further market stability, and actually if that market shuts down, yeah, and the same rules are another one, you enlarge the market, you can move to a different area. Yeah, there are significant benefits. Commercial, it's a bit trickier. It's a bit trickier, which is why we're trying to encourage it. Yeah, the regulations only standardise when class are used. Class are expensive. Internationally, commercial sector needs to tailor each vessel to flag states. It means you can't mass produce. It means you can't keep stock. You don't know where the next buy is coming from. So the greater the standardisation and harmonisation, the better it is for industry. So can the commercial sector standardise? Workboat allows for some. Yeah. So we've started. Yeah, we have started towards it. I think the most important thing is to continue on this process and allow the standards when they're fit for purpose to fit in. Several EU flags generally accept workboat codes, and so yeah, there is some standardisation there. And we really need flag engagement. So Simon's going to hate me for saying this, but talk to Simon at the back, encourage him to come along and engage with us a little bit. I know they're trying, I know they're under-resourced. No, they have been, they've been very much under-resourced over a number of years. Definitely encouragement to come along and help us out, and let's make it fit the purpose. So, really, what are the options? Let's have a quick look. You know, this is where we can go. This is how we can move forward. They're reviewed periodically. Yeah. So, with flag state involvement, we can ensure that during the review, that they are at the right level when they're published. They automatically get accepted. Secondly, we could go down the just accept international standards, just accept them. Probably not going to happen at this stage. Alternatively, we can create them specifically for the commercial sector. Yeah, if the commercial sector wants a standard because the existing ISO doesn't work, we can create them for just the commercial sector if necessary. We're willing to do that. Okay, so it's just feeding in what industry needs. We're there to provide for industry. Questions? Okay. There we go. Final slide. Good, wasn't it? Benefits of standardization, they're documented. Yeah, really, really beneficial for industry. As an industry, we need to promote to ensure competitiveness within the global market. We need to promote that use. That use is through regulators having acceptance. Full stakeholder engagement is definitely required. We need everyone to be involved to make sure that when these standards are published, they are at the right level. And that's it. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
Are you in management in the PS? Are you guys who are in the management of these standards or ISO motivated and your bonuses calculated on the number of standards you complete?
No, it's voluntary for us. We all do it voluntarily. So my representation and all the work that I do on international standards is funded by British Marine members. They pay for me to go and have the meetings where I am.
Because the problem I've got is that you mentioned those 99 odd standards for preparation. To go through those, it's all right having going into each one, but you can end up either spending or addressing weeks to get which one is relevant. You get a standard, it says go to that standard, and so on. You're following the paper trail.
I understand. What I'm going to do, I'm going to take one hat off and put the other hat on. As a British Marine member, you can phone me and I tell you which one to use. No problem. It's possible. There are a lot of standards. Yeah, there are a lot of standards out there, but they are scoped. The information is out there. If you go onto the BSI website, you can see which standards they are. If you go onto the ISO website, you don't have to buy a standard to see what's the scope. Yeah, and then there are other documents that help as well, which direct you to which standard to use for whichever area of the boat you're looking to design. Yeah, so there is lots of additional help out there.
We a little while ago, there was quite a buzz about wheel marking. It seems to have faded away a bit. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Wheel marking, yeah, wheel marking is a bit different. That's the Marine Equipment Directive. So wheel marking comes under Marine Equipment Directive, which is a directive on. It doesn't apply to small craft. Yeah, it doesn't apply to in some areas of commercial. Yeah, they will require wheel marking. Yes, but that's a different directive. You have the TC 188 covers the small craft, recreational craft area. Then you have the Marine Equipment Directive, which involves things like SOLAS, etc. So it's IMO class convention equipment, which is then wheel marks. Wheel marking is just how a piece of equipment is designed, constructed, and then certified. There's probably a lot of talk about it because the directive changed last year. So there is a new directive out there which has been implemented by the IIMS.
So that isn't interlinked with ISO?
Yeah, it's a little bit interlinked. Yeah, it's a bit. Marine Equipment Directive doesn't accept a lot of ISOs. It does accept some in certain areas. Yeah, but again, the Marine Equipment Directive is legislative, so that's a law, and it will tell you if you want to use a bit of carpet on this type of boat, it's going to have this certification. It will then tell you how to get that certification. Sometimes that's through class, yeah, sometimes that can be through the use of ISO standards, but there are few ISO standards.
Is that legislated through the IMO or?
No, Marine Equipment Directive is legislated through Europe's European directive.
For those of you who are members of the IIMS, we do maintain many of the small craft documentation in the office, and it's freely available for members. You just need to ask us.
Okay.
Yeah. Where are we at with small commercial vessels, old, yellow, and blue codes?
Oh, the Workboat Code, of course, is 2014 published, and we're expecting a new one soon. Just looking at Simon, that we're expecting a new one soon. Second edition. In regard to the kind of the charter, I suppose it is. It's the recreational craft code. It's still in development with negotiations between industry, user, and the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. We are having regular meetings and going through the what's been put forward by industry in the IIM.
So it hasn't gone out for consultation yet.
Not full consultation yet.
Is it going to be another MGM 280?
I can't answer that, to be honest. I can't answer that. There is a lot of discussions going on at the moment. It's coming along. You know, there is a lot of discussions going on. There has been a big input from from various areas already, and now it's just talking to the MCA about what's been
written down. You've said that ISOs are driven by consensus of committees. And ISOs are used to underpin, I think it's Annex 13 in MGN 280 or whatever. And notably, all those standards listed is the latest. There are no dates against those standards and so on, which sort of ties it a bit back to a comment about the French. My concern is whether sort of the MCA in particular appreciate that the ISOs are driven by consensus, because the codes themselves sort of are largely presented from a safety sort of first perception, whereas ISOs are driven by potentially a load of French boat builders sitting around the table, and maybe a bit too topical. But what I'm driving at is that very often ISOs are an easy route through, rather than sort of the tough inherited route that came from earlier standards. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, no, definitely. Well, the whole thing is about having full stakeholder engagement. You know, we can get ISO standards that are fit for purpose if the people who have the knowledge, have that information, feed in. The codes are a long time, they were a long time in development. I think the blue, yellow, red and brown is in 1993, 94. That was before the RCD, that was before the committees had been set up. So they were established a long time before. You know, but the world is changing. You know, 23, 24 years later, you know, and things are moving on. You know, it is a much smaller world. There is a lot more international trade. Can or do we want to solely rely on a basis which was developed 23, 24 years ago? Or do we want to put input and ensure that what is developed internationally is at the right level for safety? And I understand the French comment, but believe me, we managed to keep it there.
Right, there is time for one final question before we break for tea. There is. Sorry.
I'm just going to hide for this one.
Thanks, Russ. That's been a very interesting presentation. You skated around some more controversial, which is very helpful. I think that you're absolutely right in what you say, but I sort of take it back to one of the first comments that you made, that the new approach sets the high level goals and safety goals, and then the technical standards goals in detail as to how it works. And that's certainly very much the NCA way of doing it. But for those that haven't met me, I'm Simon Moore, actually head of Vessel Standards, so that I've led the team to develop all the different technical standards, including these codes. But I think one key role, you're talking about developing standards by consensus and again stakeholder engagement. There is one role for government that's different from all that, and is that we inject into the codes the societal expectations of level of safety. We do have to answer to ministers and to the general public that the standard of safety is appropriate. And so the codes are framed around setting a level of safety that's appropriate for UK society. I'm sure everybody's got been to different parts of the world. If you've ever taken a taxi, as I've done somewhere in Colombia, you'll realise the societal level of safety is very different to what's expected in Colombia. And that is our role, is to set what we believe British society will do. Within that, then, the role of the ISO standard, quite rightly, is to set the detailed technical solution to meeting those standards. And we mentioned earlier the tapers and propellers and propeller shaft. It's essential to have a standard in that. You want the propeller to fit the shaft up. But it's not really a safety thing, it's only a very secondary safety matter. More than happy to leave that from ISO standard. But when it comes to fundamental issues of safety, then we do have a role. The issue that we're discussing between us in this development of a new standard of radio set is where the boundary is between the nuts and bolts and the high level safety provision. And that's a discussion that we are moving quite briskly forward between us. And hopefully we will get a new multicoloured code out in the future.
The rainbow
Well, on that note, perhaps I could ask you all to thank Ross very much indeed.